Press, audio check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And everyone can hear me, right? All right, good. Bar is open, kitchen's open. Get yourself something to eat. Tim, clean, crisp. Great. Press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can get to 6 if I try. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Thank you, guys. Mike, you good? One.
Wording.
Just tell them you're checking out the Now you can do me. I just want to know.
Well, folks, I was asked to introduce the governor this morning. Okay, well, we're ready to go here, I think. I'm State Representative Dave Deal. For those of you who don't know me, I represent a large portion of Story County outside of Ames. I've been in the legislature for 10 years now, and I've had some experience, as Governor Christie has, working with the Democratic legislature. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why I'm supporting Governor Christie. First of all, when I looked at this race, I wanted somebody with some executive experience that's actually run for office before and won. And the bonus is he's won in a blue state twice, I believe now, and one re-election, which is a plus for me. And some of the things that he's gotten done, it's really difficult. People will look at a record of a governor like Governor Christie and say, well, what's he really gotten accomplished? And it's difficult when you're running with the Democratic legislature to get some of these things done. I'm sure he is looking forward to going to Washington and maybe have a Republican Congress that he can work with. But the fact that he was able to get some things done like teacher tenure reform and some of the things in education that he's been able to get done, he's taken them on. And I tell you, that is the power base of the Democratic Party. I've tried numerous times here in Iowa to get something done on teacher tenure, and it's just darn near impossible. So I really am impressed with the fact he got some of those things done, balanced budgets for 6 or 7 years in a row now, and those types of things. So that's why I'm supporting the governor, and I look forward to hearing his comments. I know he leaves a lot of times for question and answer, so you folks have a chance to find out what he really thinks about the issues. So thank you for all being here. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Well, good morning. Who says it's cold outside, right? No problem. What a great crowd here this morning. Thank you all for coming so much. Appreciate it a great deal. David, thank you for your support, and thank you for being here this morning and for your introduction. I appreciate it very much. I'm happy to be back in Iowa. I'll be here all weekend. I wanted to pick the coldest weekend. And I wanted to do that because I don't think you can run for president without being real cold in Iowa. I think you need to do that. So I'm happy to be back. Let's talk to you about one or two things right off the top quickly. And Dave's right. I leave the majority of the time here, the overwhelming majority of the time, for you to ask me questions. I want to know what's on your mind, and I want you to hear me answer your questions directly. Well, I just got back from the debate on Thursday night. How many people watched the debate here? That was better. It was better, wasn't it? I mean, there were only 7 of us up there. That was nice. We got to get 90-second answers instead of 60-second answers. That was great. And I felt like it was a really substantive debate. I thought for the most part we had a lot of really good questions from the moderators, some good interchange, between the candidates. And I felt really good about the fact that I got to answer a bunch of questions and really got to take my time to do it. When there was 10 of us up there, if you got 3 or 4 questions and you got 60 seconds to answer, you can't really do that and run for president of the United States. That's why I like to do these town halls, because I give much longer answers. In fact, my daughter, who is a sophomore at Notre Dame, she came to a few of my town halls in New Hampshire over her Christmas break. And I said to her, so what do you think? And she said, your answers are too long. So I'm trying to find the sweet spot between that 60-second answer and the ones that my daughter says are too long at my town hall meetings. First, I think we're all grateful, at least the reports that we hear this morning, that the Iranians have released our Americans and over there. And we have to thank God for that and pray for their safe return and pray for the strength for their families who have put up with them being separated from our country and from their families for a long time. The concern I have, and we don't know yet, is that the president made a trade. Now, when this president makes trades, this is a big problem. This is not a guy I would let negotiate buying a car for me, let alone anything else. I mean, he makes bad deals, and he seems to become an expert at making bad deals with the Iranians. Fact is that we shouldn't have to trade anything to get our citizens back home. They were taken illegally by a rogue regime of mullahs over in Iran, and this is the problem with this president. He gets no respect around the world. No respect. If we had a president who was respected around the world, we wouldn't have these folks taken in the first place. We remember the last time we had Iranian hostages. Again, a president that the world did not respect in Jimmy Carter. And as soon as Ronald Reagan took the oath of office, those Iranians returned our citizens immediately because they knew if they didn't, they would have to face the strength of character and the wrath of Ronald Reagan. We need a president like that in the White House again, who people say understands what the problems are in this country and will fight hard for our citizens. So we have to be grateful that those folks are being sent home. But we also have to scrutinize what this president gave away in the process. He's been trading terrorists from Guantanamo Bay back into the terrorism business. This is an awful thing. And this president doesn't understand. You heard him the other night in the State of the Union. And one of my favorite parts of the debate was when they asked me about the State of the Union. I said I felt like I was watching Story Time with Barack Obama. Right? I mean, if you listen to the president, you would think that everything is fabulous here in America and around the world. His Syrian policy is working. He called ISIS just a bunch of guys with beards with guns on the back of pickup trucks. I want you to think about that, everybody. I wonder if the president would have the guts to say that to the families of the 130 people who were killed in Paris. I wonder if he'd have the guts to say that to the families of the 14 people who were killed in San Bernardino, California. Or the people who were killed in Turkey last week. Or the people who were killed in Jakarta this week. All killed by ISIS terrorists. These are not people with beards and guns on the backs of pickup trucks. They're a sophisticated terrorist organization that wants to kill Americans and anyone else who stands for freedom and liberty in the world. Anyone else who does not believe in their radical Islamic jihadist point of view. Just understand what they want to do here, everybody. They want to impose their religious beliefs upon us. So much different. We can't conceive of that in America. I had a group of students who I met outside as I was coming in here this morning, and they all had pocket copies of the Constitution. And they asked me to sign my favorite amendment. So I signed the 10th Amendment because I'm a governor, about the power leaving the federal government and coming back to the states. But remember the First Amendment. In this country, it's not only freedom of religion, it's also freedom from establishment of religion. What we stand for in this country is that everyone, as long as they do it peacefully, should be able to practice the religion that they see fit. There's not one religion in this country for everybody. We have Protestants and Catholics and Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists. Anyone who wants to come to this country, Sikhs, and practice their religion, if they want to do it peacefully and not try to impose it upon anybody else, the First Amendment guarantees the freedom of that religion and the freedom of them to do it as they see fit. What ISIS wants to do is to impose their religion upon all of us. And they are willing to do it through violent means, to kill those who will not comply and to intimidate those of us who are left. It's not right. And the president doesn't understand that. That's not just guys on the back of a pickup truck with beards and guns. But he wants to minimize it because he wants you to believe he's done all he could. Fact is, of all the people in this race, I'm the only one who has fought terrorism. The only one who has investigated them, prosecuted them, and sent them to jail. I was named U.S. Attorney by President George W. Bush on September 10th, 2001. And the job that I accepted on September 10th became very different the next day. One of those airplanes left my state in New Jersey. And New Jersey lost more citizens on September 11th than any other state in the Union except for New York. And it's a very personal thing to me, not only because I spent 7 years fighting it and bringing some of the biggest terrorism cases the country's ever seen, using the tools that were necessary, the intelligence community and the law enforcement community, to stop attacks before they happened, not what happened in Boston, where we didn't catch the folks until after they murdered people. The cases that I did, we caught them before they hurt any Americans. That's what we should be striving for every day here. Catch these terrorists, get the intelligence we need to catch them before they act, before they cost American lives. And September 11th was very personal for me. I told you I had a new job, and I took the day off from work from my old job, because heck, I was leaving anyway, so I took the day off, and I took the kids to school. Mary Pat did what she normally did every day. She left our house at 6 in the morning. She drove to the train station in Madison, New Jersey, got on the train, took the train to Jersey City, New Jersey, got on what's called the PATH train. And that PATH train went from Jersey City, New Jersey, as it always did, to the basement of the World Trade Center in lower Manhattan. And she took those big escalators up from the basement to the ground level, and she walked the two blocks to her office, 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. I called her that day after I dropped the kids off from school just to check in and see how her day was starting. She, of course, wanted to ask me, did they brush their teeth? Did they take their vitamins? Because she knew that the father was in charge that morning, and it was unlikely that much of that actually got done. And we started talking about the things that husbands and wives talk about. At the beginning of a day, who was going to do what and how all that was going to work. And then, when I spoke to her, the first plane had already hit the first building. And she said, yup, it's a fire. They said it's just a commuter plane. Don't worry about it. We're all working at our desks, and we hear the fire engines coming. They're going to take care of the fire. No one's worried. And then while we were on the phone, the second plane hit the second building. And then we knew that it was no accident. And she got off the phone because she said they told her that they had to evacuate to the basement of their building. So she and her coworkers and all the other people in that building evacuated to the basement. She said, I'll call you as soon as I can. I then went through the next 5 hours not hearing from her. During that 5 hours, both buildings came down. There were reports, you might remember, of other bombs going off in lower Manhattan. It turned out to be wrong, but none of us knew that then. I continued to try to call her on her cell phone and couldn't get her. And then we had 3 children at the time. Andrew was 8, Sarah was 5, and Patrick was a year old. And the school where the 8-year-old and the 5-year-old went called me, and they said, listen, we're calling all the parents of children who have those parents working in Manhattan. There's so many kids in that school who had parents working in Manhattan that they felt like they had to tell the children about the attack. So they said, when you come to pick them up this afternoon at 2:30, they're going to ask you about how their mother is. So you need to be ready to talk to them. So I thought about three things after I got off that phone call. The first was kind of what was my life going to be like if I lost my best friend. Mary Pat and I met in college. And we got married at 23 and 22. She's younger, of course. So we had grown up together. We had literally grown up together. So what was I going to do without my best friend? The second thing I thought about was, what am I going to tell the kids if I haven't spoken to her? If I don't know whether she's dead or alive? What am I going to say to them? What's a responsible parent do? Do I just tell them the truth, or do I try to put it off, or how do I deal with it? And then the third thing I thought about was, if the worst has happened, what kind of single parent am I going to be? Am I ready to raise 3 children, 8, 5, and 1, alone, on my own? And how's that going to change their lives? And how's it going to change mine? About 10 minutes before I left to go and pick them up, about 5 after 2, the phone rang, and I got the best phone call I've ever gotten in my life. It's Mary Pat on the other end of the phone. And what she told me was that they had decided to leave the building after the 2 trade towers had fallen. They didn't feel safe there anymore. So they disregarded what the police were telling them, and they left. They got T-shirts that were in the basement of the building, and they wet them completely, and they wrapped them around their faces because you couldn't breathe in Lower Manhattan because of all the dust and the debris. And you could barely see. So she said that she and 5 of her coworkers held hands and worked their way walking north up Manhattan Island to get out of the disaster area. And she had eventually made her way to a payphone that finally worked. And she called me to tell me she was okay. We had to figure out how to get her off the island. Tunnels were closed, the bridges were closed, trains were stopped. There was no PATH station anymore below the World Trade Center. It's been crushed by the debris. And so she took a boat that went to the Jersey Shore. Goes every day. A lot of people from the Jersey Shore work in Manhattan. They take a boat every day from the Jersey Shore up to Lower Manhattan. So I drove down there to pick her up. I'd done it a couple of times before when we were on vacation. So I knew where the station was. I went to pick her up. And they usually let us go right up to the dock, but that day they kept us about 3-4 blocks away. So I saw someone walking down the street towards me that looked like my wife. But she was wrapped in a blanket. And as she got closer, I saw that she was soaking wet from head to toe. What they did when you came in from Lower Manhattan was they had the fire department there, and if you came from Lower Manhattan, they hosed you off with a fire hose from head to toe to get all the debris off of you so you wouldn't bring any of the contaminants into New Jersey. And then a local department store gave away blankets so that people who got hosed down could be warm. That's the way I saw my wife the first time. Hosed down from head to toe, coming out of a disaster area. But it was the best sight I ever saw in my life. I got her home. When we got home, one of the first calls we got was from a friend of ours who's a part of our parish. And Mary Pat had helped her husband get a job in downtown Manhattan. He had lost his. She circulated his resume to some friends and helped him get a job. He worked at a place called Eurobrokers, which was on the 44th floor of World Trade Center Tower 2. And his wife asked Mary Pat, did you see him? Did you see Frank today? I said, no, I didn't see Frank today. She said, when you were leaving, did you see him? Did you see him walking around anywhere? Mary Pat said, I didn't see Frank today. She said, well, I'm sure he's probably at a hospital somewhere and he just can't call me, and I'm sure I'll hear from him soon. When she got off the phone, we both knew that Frank was not in the hospital someplace. And Frank never came home. And the gym at our parish is now named after him. We got a call that night, too. My oldest son's, our oldest son's best friend's father worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor of World Trade Center Tower 1. No one got out of there alive. And I've watched that young man grow up now, from the time he was 8 years old to now he's 22. Grow up without a father. His siblings grew up without a father. And his wife grew older without her husband. And every year since Facebook's been around, This young man, on the day of his father's birthday, puts his father's picture as his cover photo on his Facebook page. And it's his father in a tuxedo at a wedding. Big smile on his face, looking like he was having a really good time. And all he writes is one line underneath it. He just writes, "Dad will never forget you." What I fear in this administration, in this country, is that we're forgetting Frank, and we're forgetting this young man's father. We're forgetting about what the cost of terrorism really is. We're forgetting about what the cost is of keeping our guard down. We're forgetting about what the cost is of putting someone in the Oval Office who doesn't have the first idea of how to keep America safe and secure, and that's the first and most important job of the President of the United States. See, I'll never forget, because I see these people every day and more. I live with them. I'm their governor. And I see the pain and the suffering that they've gone through for the last 14 years. And when you see that and experience it, you never forget. You never forget the real cost. It's long ago off the news, but it's in our neighborhood every day. And so if you give me the chance to be President of the United States, you can be guaranteed that I will never forget the cost of terrorism and what it does to families in this country. I will never forget the lessons I learned as a prosecutor and how you have to stop these folks before they start. And no one will have to teach me these things. I won't have to read the owner's manual. Okay? I've done it already. And as you now speed towards the caucuses on February 1st, and they're going to be here faster than we know, and you start to make your decision, I'd urge you to think about who is the person who's most tested, most ready, most prepared to keep America safe and secure. Because if we don't do that well, everybody, nothing else matters. The economy, education, Social Security, Medicare, all important issues. But if you're afraid to come out of your house, none of the rest of those things matter. Government must do its most important job first. That is to protect the safety and security of the American people. And that's exactly what I will do as President of the United States. And I'm the one who's best prepared to do it. And so that's where I come from. That's the experience that I'll bring to the Oval Office if you give me a chance. And if you look at the other 6 people on the stage, all good men, but none of them have that experience. And none of them will be ready on day one to do what needs to be done to restore safety and security to our country and peace to the world. And here's the last thing. Now I'll take your questions. You'll hear, especially now that I'm doing well, you're going to hear lots of things about me in the next couple of weeks. Now, the better you do in the polls, the more you get talked about, and the more your opponents start to criticize you. That's okay. I'm a big boy. I come from New Jersey. It's fine. Broad shoulders. But here's the thing. They'll say lots of things about me. Here's the one thing you'll never hear them say, that I've been misunderstood. Right? I say lots of things about me, but I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. Sometimes you like it, and sometimes you won't, but you'll never have to wonder. Here's the good part. Neither will our enemies. They will never have to wonder the limits of America's patience and what will happen if they violate it. So, there's only one rule for my town halls in Iowa. That is, you raise your hand and I call on you. Now, in New Jersey, I have to have 4 rules for town hall meetings. So you all in Iowa are very well behaved. I only need one rule. Only one rule in Iowa. Just call, raise your hand, and I'll call on you. Here's the thing. I want to hear as many questions as I can today, and I want to answer as many questions as I can because it's time to make some decisions, and you need to hear from me directly on what's going on. So let's start right here. Since I'm at Iowa State, let me start with the guy with the Iowa Hawkeye hat on. To show, hey, hold on now. This is to show that I can bring people together. Yeah. Right? So let's start with the Iowa Hawkeye fan.
And Governor, I'm from Illinois.
Are you?
Okay.
All right.
I'm really in hostile country.
You are in hostile country.
Okay. As you just alluded in your monologue, sir, our standing in the world has so depreciated. Not if, but when you're president, how do you go about reversing it? How do you restore our stature in the world so that we don't get taken advantage by Putin and the mullahs in Iran and Kim Jong-un in North Korea? I mean, we've got ourselves in such a hole that I don't know, and again, this is why better men than I and women run for president. How did we dig out from that hole, sir?
Sure. You do 3 things. The first thing is you have to rebuild our alliances around the world. Our alliances around the world are broken because this president doesn't keep his word. So he says that he's going to draw a red line in Syria, and if Syria uses chemical weapons on his people, that we'll attack them. Syria uses chemical weapons, kills 250,000 of their own people, and we do nothing. In fact, what we do is invite Russia in to help to mediate the dispute. Just what you want. That great peacemaker, Vladimir Putin, coming in to settle the dispute, right? And so the problem with that is that then our allies are watching that. And they say, we can't count on this guy to keep his word. So everyone goes off and freelances, does their own thing because America's not leading. You have to rebuild those alliances. And the only way to do that is person-to-person contact. So in the first 100 days that I'm president, I will invite the President of Canada, or the Prime Minister of Canada, the President of Mexico, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, and the Prime Minister of Israel, individually, to come to Camp David and meet with me. The first hour or two will be reserved for them to vent about the ways they've been mistreated over the last 8 years by the guy who didn't keep his word. They need to get that off their chest. And then I'm going to ask them, what's your vision for a safer, more secure world? What steps are you willing to take to help to make that happen? And how can America help you to meet your vision? And then the last thing I'll tell them is what my vision is. And we'll try to marry those together and rebuild those alliances. But the only way to do that is through person-to-person contact and through keeping your word then as you move forward. Second thing we need to do is rebuild our military. We now have the smallest active duty army that we've had since 1940, prior to World War II. We have the smallest Navy that we've had since World War I. And the president wants to cut the Air Force by 50% over where it is right now. The rest of the world sees this. They know those same numbers. And unless we show them that we're willing to invest in the strength of our military, they will continue to push us and try to take advantage of us. So the second thing you need to do is rebuild your military. The third thing you need to do is to go and meet with those adversaries. You need to start having conversations with them, China, Russia, initially, to say to them, listen, we don't want to have a bad relationship with you. We're not looking for war. But here are the limits of our patience. And don't violate them. Don't violate them. Don't test us. I got asked this 2 debates ago because I had said I advocate for a no-fly zone in Syria and a safe zone in Syria so that we can keep Syrians in Syria. So we don't have Syrian refugees running all over the world to Europe and the Middle East. Right now, the 4th largest city in Jordan is a refugee camp. You can't live that way. So we need to keep Syrians in Syria. So someone asked me at 2 debates ago, well, if you had a no-fly zone in Syria and the Russians were to fly into no-fly zone, what would you do? And I said, well, I would tell President Putin before that it is a no-fly zone. And that means him too. No flying in the no-fly zone. They followed up and said, well, but what if he did anyway? I said, well, then I'd shoot his plane down. Now, I don't understand why this is such a unusual thing to say. It's called a no-fly zone. Not a sometimes fly zone or a maybe fly zone or you can fly but others can't zone. It's called a no-fly zone. Words matter. And your actions must back up your words. And so, you know, Rand Paul was standing next to me, went crazy. He's going to start World War III. I said, that's what stops war, Senator. Strength stops war. It doesn't start it. Weakness is what starts war. Misgivings, misunderstandings, miscommunications. If you're clear and direct, and if we tell Vladimir Putin, don't fly in the no-fly zone, I'm willing to bet you he won't. And if he does, and we shoot down one of his planes, he's not going to send another one in. So our adversaries need to know the limits of our patience. Not that America wants to dictate to them what they do inside their own countries, but that we want to stand firmly for the idea that there are limits to their adventurism outside their own country. So when Russia goes into Crimea and Ukraine, and now they're in Syria, when the Chinese refuse to control their client state, North Korea, there has to be a cost for that. And when the Iranians supply money to Hezbollah and Hamas and say that they want to wipe Israel off the map, there has to be a cost for that. Because if there isn't, they'll keep doing it. And you saw it this week with our sailors on their knees, with their hands behind their back at the point of Iranian guns. That's an image that we don't want to see again. And it's a disgrace that this president allowed it to happen. But he allowed it to happen because he's allowed our enemies to misunderstand him. Or maybe, unfortunately, to understand him. So those are the three things you do to rebuild America's standing in the world. None of them happen overnight. But we didn't get here overnight. This has been 7 years of a president who has made the world a more dangerous place. And it's going to take some time to fix it. You have to have the patience and the strength and the character to do it. And I am ready to do that job. And that's exactly how I'll do it. Yes, sir, right through there. Yep, you. Yeah, the question was, he's concerned also about the national debt. Am I tough enough to make decisions that might lead me to be a one-term president? Man, I was pretty convinced I was going to be a one-term governor. I'm the conservative Republican governor of a Democratic state. We haven't elected a Republican to the United States Senate in New Jersey in 43 years. It's the longest streak of any state in the country not to elect a Republican. So I'm used to this concept of going in and doing what you think is best and letting the chips fall politically where they may. Here's the evidence of that, so you just have to take my word for it. And I don't even want you to, you can go back and look at my record in New Jersey, and I'm proud of it, and we've stood up and done tough things, like Dave talked about in the open. But I'm the only person in this race, the only person who has put forward a plan to reform entitlements. A detailed 12-step plan to reform entitlements that will save over $1 trillion over the next 10 years. Why did I do that when everyone says entitlement spending is the third rail of American politics? If you touch it, you die. Well, I'm not touching it, I'm hugging it. And here's why. 71% of all federal spending right now in this year's budget is on entitlements and debt service. 71 cents on every dollar we spend is on things in the rearview mirror, everybody, not in America's future. So if you want to deal with the debt problem, why would you spend all your time talking about the 29 cents rather than the 71 cents? And you saw on that debate stage on Thursday night, Maria Bartiromo asked Marco Rubio a direct question on entitlements, and he talked about tax reform. Why did he do that? Because he don't want to talk about entitlements. And he can't talk about entitlements because he doesn't have a plan. His plan is don't answer. Kick the can down the road. Don't deal with it because it's too tough. Then she went to Ted Cruz. He answered a question about tax reform when she asked about entitlements. That's why I finally interrupted. And I said, can I interrupt this debate on the floor of the United States Senate for a moment between Cruz and Rubio and actually answer your question on entitlements? The reason why I give you that answer in response to debt is, if we don't deal with entitlements, which is 71 cents of every dollar, we'll never deal with debt. We'll never deal with the $19 trillion in debt that we have in this country. So I say two things on Social Security and two things on Medicare. And then I urge you to go to chrischristie.com, look at the rest of the plan too, which involves Medicaid and Medicaid disability insurance and the other entitlement programs. We need to raise the retirement age. Here's why. We're all living longer. It's a blessing. The average life expectancy of a woman now in the United States is 83 years old. The average life expectancy of a man is 79 years old. Now, I see a few of you smiling, the ladies in particular. I want you to know that 10 years ago, you were 6 years ahead of us. Now you're only 4 years ahead of us. We are gaining on you. And if, in fact, you're counting on that 4-year vacation from us at the end of your life, you may not get it. You may be stuck with us for the entire run. But because we're living that much longer, these programs were developed for when people's life expectancy was 65. A great deal for the government back then. They let you retire at 62. You paid in your whole life. You collected for 3 years. You died at 65. They gave your survivors a little bit of the money, and then they kept the rest of it. It was a great deal. It's not happening anymore. People are living 15 and 20 years beyond where the programs were designed for. So I say we raise the retirement age 2 years from 67 to 69, and we raise it over 25 years. So that means it goes up 1 month a year for 25 years. So no one who's on Social Security is going to get kicked off, and no one who's close to it is going to be delayed years in getting on it. But it will affect my children and your children, and it should, because by the time they get to that age, the life expectancy is going to be even higher. Second thing we need to do is we need to means test Social Security. Now, I know that everyone says, well, wait a second. I paid into Social Security. I want my money back. I want to be the person who brings you the bad news. There's no money there. The government lied to you and stole from you, and they stole your money. They say it's in a trust fund. You know what's in the trust fund? A stack of IOUs. They're spending the money right now. They're not keeping it for you. So what do we do to fix that? There's only two ways to do it, right? If you can't balance your checkbook, and that's what this problem is, it's a checkbook balancing problem. More money going out than coming in. You only got two choices: send less money out or bring more money in. Now, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are going to tell you what they want to do is raise Social Security tax, because they say wealthy people should pay more into Social Security. I got a question for you. Why would you give more money to the people who already lied to you and stole from you on the promise that this time they won't? I mean, this would be like if you opened up a bank here in Ames, right? Local guy opened up a bank, and you put your money in that bank. And then 2 years later, that bank would belly up and you lost some of your money. And then a year later, you get a knock on the front door, and it's that guy who opened the bank that went belly up. And he says to you, by the way, I'm opening up another new bank in Ames. I'd like your deposits. And he said, well, wait a second. You're the guy who ran the bank into the ground before, and I lost some of my money. Why would I give you money again? He goes, oh, I learned my lesson. I know the people in Iowa are very nice, but even here in Iowa, that guy's not leaving your front porch with any of your money. You're not putting it back into a bank that stole your money. Why would you give it to the government? So there's two ways to fix it. So this is what I say on means testing. If you make $200,000 a year or more in retirement, this is not your salary, this is not your home. This is $200,000 in retirement income, whether that comes from a pension or whether it comes from investments or all the rest, then under my plan, you're not going to get a Social Security check. Sorry. I know you paid in. I know you're getting shafted. I'm sorry. But the people who need that Social Security, the people who that makes a difference between rent and heat and food. And we need to take care of those people. And with all due respect, if you're making $200,000 a year in retirement, is Social Security really going to make a difference in your life? It's not. I know you want it. I had a guy in Exeter, New Hampshire yell at me, it's my money, I want it back. I'm like, listen, man, I'd love to give it to you, but they stole it. They stole it. And we do the same thing with Medicare, by the way. Increase the eligibility age 2 years, put it in over 25 years, so 1 month a year, every year. And if you make over $200,000 a year or more in retirement and you want Medicare, that's fine. Right now we subsidize it 75% for people at that level. I would only subsidize it 10%. So you still get a subsidy, but you get a smaller one. And the reason you get a smaller one is because you don't need it. And the people who really do need it, we need to take care of. And so that plan and the other 8 steps will save $1 trillion over 10 years, and that's when we start to get at the debt problem. Keep running this debt up. And remember something about this Republican Congress and this president. Just 2 months ago, they passed a budget that stole another $150 billion from the Social Security Retirement Fund and put it in the Disability Fund. Republicans did that with the president. We need a president who will say, no way. No more stealing money from the Social Security Fund to spend on other things that you want to spend it on. That money is the people's money, and it's got to stay there. So that's the way I would start to work on the debt. And why we start there? Because it's 71 cents of every dollar. And like Willie Sutton used to say when they asked him why he robbed banks, he said, I robbed banks because that's where the money is. In the federal budget, you want to fix the debt problem, you got to go where we spend the money, and that's 71 cents of every dollar. Demand any other candidates you see between now and the caucus time, ask them what their plan is on entitlements. You'll get the same answer Rubio gave you the other night. Let me talk about tax reform. Make him talk about entitlements. Yes, sir, right there. The question was, I give an example of a time I made a mistake and what I learned from it. I'm trying to go through in my mind all of the mistakes I made and which one I want to give you. I'll give you one that's professional instead of personal. In my administration, I've employed a lot of people over the course of the last 6 years, and in the 7 years before that as U.S. Attorney. And I've worked with great people. In the main, great people. But a couple of years ago, I had some people in my employ who appear to have done something really awful concerning the George Washington Bridge. Right? And I trusted those people to give them jobs, and they let me down. And what I learned from it is that you can't be too trusting in this business. That you have to ask more questions rather than less, and that you can't be nearly as trusting as I was. And especially when you have the kind of responsibility that I have. And so, what I've learned, when I learned about it, I fired them immediately. I went out and I took accountability for everything that happened, and cooperated with all the different investigations that happened that all concluded saying that I didn't know anything about it and hadn't done anything wrong. But nonetheless, it happened on my watch. And so you learn. You learn when you manage and you're responsible and accountable, where you're not just sitting on the floor of the United States Senate and voting yes or no, and if you don't like the vote, you can change it. And then another vote will come up some other time, and it's of no consequence. When you're in charge of something, you're accountable. And so I've become less trusting and more questioning about everybody, even people who are immediately and closest around me. And I think that'll serve me really well when I'm President of the United States, too. So that's one example of recent vintage. I could talk to you about my college years, but then we would have time for no other questions in the town hall meeting. Let me go over here. Let me go near the door for those folks. You're pointing to someone. Yes, this lady with both hands up. I see you. I see you, ma'am. We're calling on you. Go ahead. Tell me what you got.
Thank you very much.
Whoa, she's got a microphone, too.
I have a microphone.
Okay.
Too close to it, I can tell. In this country leads the nation in the percentage of our citizens that we incarcerate. The state you're in right now leads the country in the disproportionate minority incarceration. We have a bill at the federal level, the Grassley-Durbin bill, which is a good start at taking care of some of those problems. Earlier in the campaign, I heard almost all of the candidates talk about mass incarceration and our need to reduce it, both because of the human and the financial problems it was causing in this country. If you become president, what will you do at the federal level, and what will you do to encourage the states to get rid of the laws that are keeping nonviolent drug offenders in prison for way too long?
Well, I thank you. I thank you for that question, because I agree with you that it's a huge problem. Let me tell you what I've done in New Jersey. 3 years ago in New Jersey, I advocated for and signed a bill that said that if you're a nonviolent, non-dealing, first-time drug offender, that you no longer go to prison. You go to mandatory inpatient drug treatment. Now, what's happened in the period of time since then? New Jersey's prison population has decreased by over 10%. And I was able to announce in my State of the State speech this past Tuesday that we are now closing a state prison in New Jersey. Closing a state prison, not building new ones. So what are we going to do with that closed state prison? We are converting it into a drug treatment facility. And so now, for folks who are in the rest of our state prison system, anyone who has a drug addiction problem will be sent to this new place where they will get intensive, certified drug treatment for the time that they're incarcerated, so that when we release them from prison, that they actually have a chance to have the tools that are necessary to deal with their disease and become a productive member of society again. That's not only moral and humane, but it's also smart, because those folks then wind up not being on the government dole, not committing crimes and going back into prison, but becoming productive members of society again, and become better mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, sisters and brothers. So we rebuild families as well, because instead of being diseased with drug addiction, they're on the road to health again, which will make them better people. I have to tell you that I absolutely believe that our country has gone off on the wrong track in the way we deal with this issue. For 30 years, we've had a war on drugs. And listen, there will always be a jail cell in my life for the dealer and for the person who uses violence in support of the drug trade. They're sociopaths and they need to go to prison. But for those people who are nonviolent, not dealers, and they are addicts, they have a disease, everybody. And we need to deal with that disease. That's not being soft. That's being smart. Because think about this. In New Jersey, it costs me $49,000 a year to incarcerate someone. It costs me $24,000 to give them a year of inpatient drug treatment. So even if you just want to be an accountant about this, right, just count it up. And where's it costing you more? It's costing you more to incarcerate these people who are not violent and not dealers by 2 to 1 than it is by giving you treatment, which might help them to become taxpayers again. Where instead of pulling out of the government, they're adding to what we're doing because they're working. This is what we need to do on the national level. If I became president, I would have drug court in every federal district court in America that takes these folks and diverts them away from prison and on to treatment. I would also tell folks that what we need to start talking about as a public is that this is a disease. It's a disease like cancer, like emphysema, like diabetes. It's a disease. And we need to give people the tools they need to deal with their disease. And so if we don't do that, we're going to continue to lose more lives. And here's the last thing. In New Jersey, 18 months ago, we've outfitted every police force in the state with Narcan because we have a heroin epidemic across our country. And in the 18 months, we've administered Narcan 7,500 times in New Jersey. And how about this? This past year, 2015, for the first time in 4 years, we had drug overdose deaths go down in New Jersey rather than up. This is saving lives, it's preserving families, and it's giving hope. And as president, that's exactly what I would say behind the seal of the President of the United States, to lower the stigma, to let this come out from the shadows, and let people seek treatment and not feel ashamed to seek treatment. We need to be a humane people. That does not mean we let violent sociopaths back on the street. They go to jail. But if you're a victim of a disease, we're not going to throw you in jail. We're going to give you the treatment you need to try to get your life back in order. That's what I've done as governor, and that's what I would do as president of the United States. Go over to this side. Young man in the blue sweater right there.
If you're elected president, how will you create a healthcare system that ensures the most possible Americans at the most affordable price?
Well, first thing I do is get Obamacare the hell out of here. I can tell you that for sure. Because there were 3 central promises to Obamacare, right? You remember them. If you like your doctor, you can keep him. Nope, didn't happen. If you like your health plan, you can keep it. Nope, didn't happen. And prices will go down. Prices have gone up exponentially. Here's what I think we need to do, is go back to the wisdom of our Constitution. The states should handle this. And here's why. The challenges that you face for health care and health care access and cost here in Iowa are significantly different than the ones we face in New Jersey. Why? Iowa's a much bigger state than New Jersey from a landmass perspective. For a lot of you, the challenge of access to care will be distance to get to the specialist, to get to the hospital that you need that can give you the best care. In New Jersey, we're a small state geographically, but we have 8.9 million people stuffed into that small state. Our problem for access is not distance. I mean, we trip over a hospital every 4 miles in New Jersey. They're everywhere. Our problem is cost. Why would you think that the same system that would help Iowa face its problems could deal with New Jersey effectively? It doesn't. So what I would say is we're repealing Obamacare, and every state has 1 year. You can't punt on this. You have to do something. Every state, the governor and the legislature has 1 year to come up with a plan that will deal with access to health care for the people of their state. I trust the governor in this state and the legislature to do this the right way. And here's the thing, if they're not doing it the right way, you have a much better chance of influencing the governor in your own state and your own state legislature than you do influencing anybody in Washington, D.C. and getting them to hear you. Last part is, I said I signed the 10th Amendment on the way in for those students who were handing me their pocket Constitution. Remember what the 10th Amendment says. If it's not listed here in this Constitution, then that power reverts to the states. I read the Constitution a number of times. I don't see health care listed anywhere. Okay? It's not a responsibility of the federal government. It's a responsibility of the states. Let's let the states do it. And that's the way I would deal with the health care issue. Let the states deal with it.
How would you at least
Yeah, well, listen, there's a number of different. The question was, how would I unify the country? He characterized my my language as what again? Which adjective did you use? Divisive. A language like calling the president a feckless weakling and a petulant child. Well, listen, I don't think that you bring people together by sugarcoating things. I think you bring people together by telling the truth. So, you can count on the fact that I wouldn't change my language. 53 now. Pretty much this is the language I use. But here's the other thing. Look at what's happened in New Jersey under my leadership. Now, I've had a Democratic legislature set off the top right from the beginning. Yet, we've capped property taxes. We've balanced 6 budgets without new taxes. We've cut business taxes $2.3 billion, which has led to the creation of 224,000 new private sector jobs. We've reformed teacher tenure. We reformed the pension and benefit system to save $120 billion over the next 30 years. All those things with Republicans and Democrats in control of 2 different branches of government. You bring people together by doing things, by accomplishing things, and by compromising. Now, every one of those accomplishments I just told you about, it wasn't exactly what I wanted. Within the individual plan, there were things I would have preferred. But I had to deal with Democrats on the other side. I had to get their votes. So I had to sit down and listen to them. The way you bring this country together is to listen and to bring compromise. And what happens in Washington now is they don't even listen to each other. The place I would ban in Washington, if I had the power to do it, is that place on Capitol Hill with all the microphones where they all stand behind them and say awful things about each other. Then they leave, the Republicans leave, then the Democrats come to the same spot and say awful things about the Republicans. But you know what they never do? They never say it right to each other's face. We've got to get together face to face and have a conversation and get to know each other. You know, the current director of the FBI, a guy named Jim Comey, was the U.S. attorney in Manhattan when I was the U.S. attorney in New Jersey. So we got to know each other really well. Later, he became my boss. He became the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And Jim gave me the best bit of political advice I've ever gotten in my life, even though we weren't talking about politics. He was to the office in New Jersey to visit me and to visit our troops. And at the end of it, he and I met alone. And I said, so Jim, what are you doing next? And he said, I'm going to the New York Times editorial board. I said, Jim, you're a Republican. You're work for John Ashcroft and George W. Bush, and you're going to the New York Times editorial board? I mean, do you have a death wish? What's wrong with you? And it's because, no, Chris, you don't get it. He goes, I'm going to the New York Times editorial board because it's harder to hate up close. I want to tell you, it's the best bit of political advice I've ever gotten. It's harder to hate up close. When we get to know each other, when we talk to each other, Republicans and Democrats, and we force that to happen, what we realize is while we disagree on things, we're not bad people. When we don't interact with each other, when we don't talk to each other, we're allowed then to believe that not only do I disagree with that person, but they're an awful person. Listen, the president is a petulant child, and he is a feckless weakling. But I'm talking about his policies. And I said that the other night at the debate. You might remember, I said I wanted to talk to the president. And I said, Mr. President, what you need to understand is it's not that we dislike you. It's that we dislike your policies. Now, that conversation you can have and still bring people together. You got to find areas of compromise. But that's not what the president's doing right now. He lost the House. He lost the Senate. He's lost the majority of the governorships based on his policies. And now he says, well, all right, you won't do it. Now I'm going to do everything by executive order and ignore you. That doesn't bring people together. So my view is I've had to sit down with my legislature and compromise every time. That's what I'll do with the Congress. And then we'll bring our country together. Last thing is this. A president of the United States can't be running around the world all the time and around this country apologizing for America. Okay? When you do that, you make Americans feel less about themselves. And listen, there are times in our country's history when we've made mistakes. So I'm not saying that there's never a time when America hasn't made a mistake, but what I am saying is the president should be talking about how exceptional this country is, lift us up, find our similarities. We don't talk about all the things that bring us together. We're talking much too much about the things that divide us rather than the things that bring us together. When you're a candidate for president, that's part of what you need to do, because you have to differentiate yourself from other people who are running. Here are our differences. When you're the president, it's different. Your obligation as president is to talk about the things that bring us together as a country. Isn't that exactly what he did in the State of the Union? No, what he did in the State of the Union was make up a whole bunch of things that haven't happened and haven't occurred. This is a guy who said his Syrian policy is working. How does that bring the country together to lie to the American people? 250,000 Syrians are dead. Millions are running to Europe and the Middle East to run away from being murdered. And he says his policy is working. When he gives us that hosanna at the end of the speech about how disappointed he is that the country hasn't come together, remember this. When me and other Republicans said we don't want to allow Syrian refugees in this country because the FBI director says they can't vet them. And we say, well, if you can't vet them, then our first job is to keep Americans safe, not to worry about other folks first, but to worry about Americans first. You know what he called? He called me in response to that. He said, he's like a terrorist. Well, hell, man, don't then lecture me about bringing the country together when you're calling someone who disagrees with your policy a terrorist. And he referred to all Republicans that way. So the president's a great performer. He reads a great teleprompter. But the fact of the matter is his policies have not brought people together. And the proof of that is the fact that you asked the question. If America was really together, we wouldn't be asking how we could bring the country together. And he has not brought our country together, and we need to give a new person a chance to do that. So.
Thank you, Governor Christie. I'm a mom of 2 young kids. I've got a baby boy coming this spring, and I am really concerned about the level of gun violence in this country. I look at my kids, and it terrifies me as a mother. I want to know if you stand with the majority of Americans, including a majority of gun owners, who support a background check for every gun sale.
Listen, I don't protect. I don't support a background check for every gun sale. There's lots of gun sales that shouldn't have to require background checks. Family members are selling other family members and friends. I don't understand why those folks need to have a background check. You want to sell a gun to your cousin or your nephew or your uncle or your aunt. I don't understand this. And let's just say this, too, that we have an extensive system already in this country of background checks. Here's why the gun violence is so high in this country. Criminals don't go through background checks, right? The people who are doing most of the commissions of gun violence in this country are criminals, are people who, they steal these weapons, they buy them on the black market, they use them, then they dispose of them. Well, listen, I don't believe that that's what's causing gun violence in this country. I don't believe putting the government more and more in between the American people and their Second Amendment rights is going to make this country safer. Because, in fact, if you look at the cities with the most strict gun control in this country, cities like New York and Chicago, they have some of the highest levels of violence in the country. If, in fact, these type of measures made us safer, why aren't they safer? They're not because... I just don't believe that. I just don't believe that that's true. And the fact is that we need to enforce the current laws that we have much more strictly than we do without adding new laws. So, these new laws are like eating cotton candy, okay? When you see it, it looks okay, and then you eat it, it tastes good, and then 5 minutes later, you remember you had it because it doesn't do anything long term. When I was U.S. Attorney for 7 years in New Jersey, we have laws on the books for felons in possession of firearms on the federal books. First offense, 5-year mandatory minimum. Second offense, 10-year mandatory minimum. That's the kind of laws we should be enforcing. People who are in the drug trade or in other crimes that are committed, when they're a felon, they're not allowed under our laws to possess a firearm. When they do, we need to arrest them, prosecute them federally, and send them to jail for a 5 or 10-year period of time without parole. That will start to get criminals off the streets and start to teach a lesson. But we're not... This administration would rather take a press conference every few weeks and say we need more laws rather than focus on enforcing the laws that we already have now aggressively. And they have not done that. Their record compared to the Bush administration, when I was U.S. Attorney, we were much more aggressive at enforcing the gun laws. And you know why? Because the President and the Attorney General told us we had to. I wasn't given discretion on that. They're like, listen, these are the laws we want. Go enforce them. I don't think we need new laws. What new laws are going to do is to separate law-abiding people from the ability to have a firearm versus others. It makes it harder and harder and harder, and more barriers are put up. And so, listen, I understand this is an issue that's emotional for people, and you can have a fundamental disagreement about it. I respect other people's point of view. I simply disagree with it. And so, you know, when I'm running for president, you have the right to ask the question. I have the obligation to give the answer. And then you have the right to be able to go through that answer in your head and decide, well, is this the kind of guy I want to vote for or not? But what you need is not to have people not answer your question, right? And so that's my point of view on it, and that's my point of view based upon the experience I've had as a prosecutor and now as a governor. And I think if you put more pressure on people to enforce the laws we have currently, you'd see gun violence go down in America. And here's the last piece, and something that I announced in my State of the State this week. We're putting another $134 million into drug treatment and mental health treatment. We need to deal with the drug and mental health problem in this country, which often leads to some of the attacks of mass violence that we have, especially on the mental health side, where you have folks who are committing mass murders, whether you're talking about Sandy Hook, Connecticut, or Aurora, Colorado, or any of the ones at Virginia Tech, any of the number ones that you could think about over time that are really frightening. We need to deal with people and give them the opportunity to get mental health treatment, whether they want it or not, before they begin to act. And I think we need to be stronger on that as well. All right. Yes, ma'am, right here.
Governor, first I just want to say you are a breath of fresh air.
Thank you.
And you are definitely from New Jersey.
I am definitely from New Jersey, yes.
Secondly, one of the issues that the white paper has brought up is that because many of the caucuses, lots of caucuses are in school buildings and other public buildings that are accessible to people with disabilities, people who use wheelchairs and such. However, there's still a significant number that are in private homes and other places that may not be accessible. And since obviously you want everybody who supports you, including people who happen to use a wheelchair for whatever reason and need accessibility features to be able to share the vote, do you have some suggestions with regard to how to deal with this so that people can exercise their vote?
Listen, I think this is the question, if you didn't hear it, was about accessibility of caucus locations to those with disabilities, especially those who are in wheelchairs and others that may have difficult access to these things. Listen.
Every caucus denial in Story County is accessible.
There you go. Well, right. So, yep. All right. Well, here's. Here's the thing. I think we could all agree on the idea that anybody who's an American citizen who has the right to vote should have the opportunity to freely and fairly vote. And so if there are access issues here in Iowa or any other state, we should deal with those access issues. And if there are folks who are having caucuses in locations where folks who are disabled cannot access those, then we need to find ways to overcome that. Because no one based upon a disability should be prevented from voting if they want to exercise their franchise. So I think that's a fairly direct problem that deserves a fairly direct answer. And the answer is we should lift those impediments, and if you can't vote in that place, they should work on another ability for you to be able to access and be able to participate in the caucus, either by moving the location or by giving you an opportunity by remote access to be able to participate and to cast your vote. Because there may not be time between now and February 1st to change locations to things. So we should give people, well, geez, listen, you can do things by Skype, you can do things by FaceTime. There's lots of things that you can do to actually actively participate in something that allows people to do those things. But you know what? I'm going to allow the Secretary of State and the leaders of the Republican Party in Iowa to grapple with this problem. There's my humble suggestion. Well, there you go. Then I don't really give a darn about those at the moment. We'll worry about those in the fall. But I would love to see everybody who wants to vote have the chance to vote. That's an American principle, a bedrock principle of our country. If you're a citizen, you have the right to vote, and I want you to vote. Whether you're voting for me or not, by the way. Although, for those of you who are not voting for me, if you have something else very important to do on caucus night, you know, give it some consideration. Yes, sir, in the back. How we contain healthcare costs? Okay, well, I'll make that really simple. No. I am not for the legalization of marijuana. I think it is a gateway drug. I think it's a drug that really affects the brain. We know it does. And if you look at what they've done now in Colorado, the principals and administrators held a meeting a number of weeks ago when we were out there for the debate in Boulder, where they said the number one challenge in the K-12 education system in Colorado right now is marijuana, because kids are bringing in edibles, brownies and gummy bears and others, and they're eating them during school and they're getting high during school. Now listen, all I remember is like physics and math were tough enough for me straight. If I were high, I got to tell you the truth, I don't think I would have had any shot at all of understanding that. On healthcare costs, listen, here's what we need to do. We need to change the way we pay physicians, hospitals, healthcare workers. Right now, those folks are reimbursed through insurance or other means on a fee-for-service basis. The more services you provide, the more money you get. That plus a legal system which encourages frivolous lawsuits to be brought, which to prevent yourself from being caught up in that lawsuit, you do every test you could possibly think of so you can't be second-guessed, which increases costs. We need to go to a performance-based system. And places like the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, are now moving towards that and showing real success. They're paying outcome-based fees to doctors rather than fee-for-service. That's one of the things I think we should examine very closely in trying to put through in the rest of the country, because they're working in other places, and we shouldn't give artificial incentives to bill more. So if you know that every time you provide a discrete different service, you're going to get paid again, there is the incentive to perhaps perform things that don't need to be done or to perform them more often than they need to be done in order to make more money. And so I think that's one of the things to lower cost, absent all the other Obamacare issues. To lower cost, I would go much more to a performance-based pay system than a fee-for-service system. So now they're telling me I can take one more question, which means I'll take two. And here's why. I want to tell you why I'm taking two questions. It's because I want to remind this staff of mine that I'm the boss. Right? You know, you laugh, but you know what it's like to run for President of the United States? Here's what it's like. You are surrounded every day by people younger than you who tell you where to go and what to do every minute of the day. This, right in here, by this stool, is the only place where I am free from the tyranny of the young. So we're going to take two questions. I'll go to this lady first.
Who are you going to choose for your vice president?
Who am I going to choose for my vice president? Let me just say this. Given that like 3 months ago I was at 2% in Iowa, I like the fact that someone's asking me who I'm going to pick for my vice president. That shows we're making progress. I have no idea. Okay, but what I will tell you is this. There are three criteria for me that are non-negotiable in picking a running mate. The first one is that the American people have to be able to look at that person and absolutely believe that they could be president of the United States. Because you never know what's going to happen in this world. And the vice president, I think it was one vice president who said, at the same time, I'm nothing and I could be everything. Right? And so the vice presidency, the main job of the vice presidency is to be ready to step in for the president of the United States if you need to. So that's the first criteria. The second one is I'd like to have someone who also has executive experience like I do. We're going to have a lot of problems to fix after 8 years of Barack Obama, and I'm going to need someone who I can send off, who I have confidence in, knows how to run things, and give them assignments within the government to fix certain areas of the government that need to be fixed. And I won't be able to trust that they can do that if they don't have the kind of executive experience that I think you need to be able to do that. The third thing is, and this is a little unusual maybe for me, but I want to like the person. And here's why. You know this. If you don't like the person, you won't work with them. I mean, you're the president. You don't have to work with them if you don't want to. And if you don't like the person, if you're not compatible, then you're not going to trust them necessarily. You're not going to give them things to do. You're not going to include them in the things you need to include them on. And if you don't include the vice president in those things, how can that person be prepared to be president? if something happens at a moment's notice. If the president is killed, if the president dies, if the president's disabled for some reason and can't perform the duties, that person shouldn't have to spend weeks getting up to speed on what's going on. So I want to like the person. I want to be compatible with the person. Those are the three things I look for. And I think we'll have a lot of really good folks within the Republican Party to consider. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to consider that. All right, and this lady right here.
Thank you. You said that you will never forget the friends you lost on 9/11, and I pray to God that's true for you. I'm obviously here as an advocate for the Alzheimer's Association. As of 2015, there were 5.3 million Americans with Alzheimer's disease. 200,000 of those people were under the age of 65. My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 62. He spent 9 long or short, depending on your view, years with the disease. I don't believe that's the way he intended to spend his retirement. And it sure is not the way I intend to spend mine. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid for my family. I'm afraid for my kids, my grandkids. How are you? I have been advocating since 1992 when my dad was diagnosed and volunteering. How are you going to help me end Alzheimer's?
I've said this a number of times before, that one of the things where I think we're being very short-sighted, and it's costing us money, not saving us money, is what we're not investing at the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation. You know, this year the National Institutes of Health budget only went up 0.1%, and the National Science Foundation spending went down 4.3%. These are the two organizations that work with the private sector to help to develop the cutting-edge treatments and cures for the diseases that we suffer. Science Foundation does other things as well. We should be investing more money in that, and I will as president, because we've got 4 diseases in this country that are costing us the overwhelming amount of money that we spend on end-of-life spending, which is upwards of 70% of all we spend in programs like Medicare and Medicaid, is end-of-life spending. Those 4 diseases are cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. And if we were able to spend what we needed to spend to work and partner with the private sector in the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry to be able to come up with effective treatments and hopefully ultimately cures of those diseases to lengthen the life that folks have and the quality of that life, it's going to save us money on the back end. Whatever we invest on the front end, we'll save a multiple of that on the back end in actual dollars that we spend on people's health care. And then you add to it the part that's incalculable that you refer to, which is your dad retires, he gets Alzheimer's, he's 62 years old. The quality of his life diminishes significantly day by day. And what that does to families, not only in terms of the loss of the enjoyment and the love of that person, but also in the time that you need to spend then to help to care for him and make sure that he's taken care of and oversee his medical treatment and be there for him at those moments when he knows who you are and can be comforted by you. And you never know with this disease when that's going to be. And so we need to spend a lot more money on the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation. And it would be one of the few places along with defense that would actually spend more money as president, because I believe in the long haul, like with drug treatment, you're saving money over the long haul by your investment in it now. And enough families are being affected not only by Alzheimer's, but by those other 3 diseases as well, that we need to get to it. And the private sector is willing to work with us on this. If we invest some money, they'll invest some money too. And that's the way we're going to get to cures and treatments for those 4 major diseases, which are really, really destroying end-of-life quality of life for people. We live till 83 and 79 on average now, but oftentimes those last number of years, the quality of the life is being diminished in many people. We need to make sure that we enhance that as much as we can. That's not only good for our quality of life, it's also good for our country. So that's what I would do on Alzheimer's, and wish you the best of luck. All right, so I got a big day today. I'm all over Iowa today. I'm all over Iowa tomorrow. I'm all over Iowa on Monday. I'm going to be in Sioux City and Council Bluffs. I'm going to be all over the place. And so that means I got to get back in the car. But let me do 2 things before I go. First is to say thank you to all of you on a Saturday morning for coming here today. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate your questions, the candor of your questions, the directness of your questions. I appreciate it very much. And I hope that you feel as if you've gotten a candid and direct answer in return, whether you agreed with it or you didn't. That's what we need to be doing with each other in this country. We need to be honest with each other. We know that we have problems in this country, but we also know we have extraordinary opportunities. And that none of us would trade our citizenship in this country with citizenship for any other country in the world. We still live in the greatest place the world's ever known. And so, yeah, we have problems that we want to make better. And we better get to work on doing that. But we also should never forget about how extraordinarily fortunate we are to live in a country like this and have the opportunities that this country provides for each and every one of us. And so I appreciate you participating in this. I tell people all the time, if they get cynical about politics, come to Iowa and New Hampshire. Because from almost a year ago now, you folks have been coming to events like this, meeting candidates face to face, listening, asking questions as you now move towards making your decision about what to do on caucus night on February 1st. And so I appreciate you coming. Second is this. I'm not going to leave here today without standing here and saying to all of you, I want your vote on February 1st. When I first started coming out here as a candidate, I wanted to let you all get to know me, and I wasn't going to ask for your vote right in the beginning because, heck, you didn't even know me all that well. So I thought it was impolite to ask people to trust me at that level before they got to know me. But I've been here a lot now, and you've all gotten to know me, not only as the governor of New Jersey and as a supporter of the governor of Iowa, and I've been out here a lot to support Governor Branstad, Lieutenant Governor Reynolds, and Senator Grassley, and a number of really good public servants who have asked me for my help. But now I'm out here for myself. You have a big decision to make. And this has been a very entertaining campaign. Very entertaining. Even to be part of it has been entertaining. You know, you think about this campaign. We started off with 17 candidates, right? Started off with 17 candidates. We've had governors and former governors, senators and former senators, business people, and a character. It's been entertaining to listen to some of the things that come out of people's mouths and some of the spectacles that have been put on and all the rest of that. And I hope you've been entertained. I've laughed a number of times, and I'm sure you've laughed even more than I have. That's great. It's good to be entertained. But we are not electing the entertainer-in-chief. We're electing the commander-in-chief. And now, with less than 2.5 weeks till the Iowa caucuses, it is no longer showtime, everybody. It's game time. It's game time. It's time to pick a president. And because we started at 17, and you all, along with the folks in New Hampshire, are probably going to be responsible for bringing that number down to 4 or 5 by the time both of you are done in the span of 8 days, you have an enormous responsibility for the rest of the country, for the other 48 states. You're going to get to pick who the 4 or 5 people are that the other 48 states even get to pick from. America's counting on you. And it's time to get serious about this now. I'm happy to be entertained, and I try to be entertaining at times. But we have serious problems and monumental opportunities. You want to elect someone who can actually do the job. We've now gone through the last 7 years of having somebody who's never run anything of any consequence, who never managed anything bigger than a 30-person Senate staff. And we put that person in charge of the most complex government the world has ever known. And we wonder why things aren't working well. Well, man, if you've never done it before, the only way you're able to do it is if you're lucky. And I don't think there's a lot of luck that runs through the Oval Office. And so let's not make the same mistake again. First-term United States senators are wonderful people, but they've never made a serious decision of consequence and be held accountable for it in their lives. And you can agree with them as much as you want, but if they can't take that philosophy and know how to manage it and work it and get it to a result, you're going to have the frustration that people feel about Barack Obama. Now, most of us in this room probably don't agree with the president on most things, but think about how frustrated the people are who do agree with him and who have been frustrated to watch him be unable to bring the country together, unable to put into effect many of the things that he ran on and wanted to get accomplished. So don't think it'll just be better if we elect a first-term United States Senator who we philosophically agree with. We'll be just as frustrated as they are when they can't get the job done. We do not need someone in the Oval Office who will sit in that chair the first day, spin around the chair and say, gee whiz, isn't it cool I'm president? We need someone who's going to sit in that chair on the first day and say, this feels familiar. I've had a chair like this before, not as big, but pretty close. And I know the way decisions come in that door. They're never easy ones. They're never good ones. They're always the toughest ones, because those are the ones you leave for the governor or for the president. And you need someone who's comfortable in making those decisions and realizing that every time you make one, that you're going to make some people happy and some people angry. And you can't shy away from that. You have to embrace it. I've been doing that for 13 years as a federal prosecutor in charge of one of the largest offices in the country, and now as governor in charge of one of the most complex and, as I lovingly call it, unruly states in the union. And remember this last thing. There are no silver medals in this business. It's not like that great pageant that we run in my state every year. You're not, because if you lose, you don't become the first runner-up who will substitute for Miss America if Miss America can't perform her duties, right? You lose and you go home a loser. We can't afford to lose this election. We cannot afford, in my opinion, to have Hillary Rodham Clinton as the next president of the United States. And so I want you to think about who is the person who is best prepared, most tested, to stand on that stage across from her when the fur really starts to fly. And with Hillary Clinton, you know it will. And I've been tested by the most liberal, difficult media market in the entire world, in New York City and Philadelphia. They're on my back every day of every week that I've been U.S. attorney and I've been governor. And when you learn to deal with that heat, only two things can happen when the bright lights go on this September, when you get on that stage for the presidential debates with Hillary Clinton. When those bright lights go on, you either shine or you melt. Well, you've seen the bright lights on me already over and over again, and you know I won't melt. I'm the person who can stand up there and prosecute the case against her and her vision for our country and win this election. And so it's not only about who's the best person to sit in that chair and the most experienced, but it's who can get there too. We don't need someone standing up there and the first time she starts to attack looks like a deer in the headlights and is looking out in the audience to phone a friend. We need someone who's been through it and can stand up to her and make the case for conservative republicanism to run this country once again. I didn't run 4 years ago because in my heart I knew I wasn't ready. I'm ready now. And I need your help and your support. And so I'm asking you for your vote, not because you think I'm the nicest guy or the most good-looking guy. Although, if you did think that, I would really like it. But because you believe I'm the person who can bring it to Hillary Clinton, and you believe that I'm the person who can sit in that chair from day one and get the job done for you. We need a successful presidency again. Our country is aching, is thirsty for a successful presidency, and that's exactly the kind of presidency that I'll bring to you if you give me the chance. So thank you, Iowa. I'll see you again soon.